You know, the old saying in the combat zone is usually your first day and your last day are the most dangerous. You either die on the first day or on the last day. And it's interesting how somewhat accurate that really is. I was close to being finished. I was like our standards pilot, and in our officers club, we all, when we got there, we were issued a wooden plaque that had, A Company 228th 1st CAD Division, Sling the World, all this. We had a plaque, and in the officers club, these plaques were hung all the way around the wall, starting at this door and going all around and ended up back at that door. And so every time people would leave, you'd all move your plaque. And so, by the end of the year, pretty soon you're getting to where you're the most senior person ever been there the longest, and that came with certain privileges and this, that, and the other. So I was getting to the point where I was almost could quit flying, and there was an emergency TAC mission that needed to be done, and whenever it was a TAC-E, as they called it, that meant you were expendable. It was not a good situation, and I did a lot of them because I didn't drink. And a lot of the pilots, they drink, so they'd ask me if I'd take their TAC-Es, which meant starting in the evening time till the next morning. If emergency came up or you need to go out at night, you'd go. Well, this didn't happen to be at night, it happened to be in the daytime, which is unusual. So our company commander, he would only fly with me. He liked to go out, but he would only fly with me, and he was cool. He'd get in and he'd say, now you remember, you're in charge. I'm a colonel, but you're in charge anyway. That was fun. So he asked me if I would do it, and I told him I would. And what it consisted of was finding a long-range patrol. These guys, they called them LERPs, and they would go out, and they'd spend a week or two. I mean, escape and evade out there. These guys are tough. And so I had a LERP patrol on board, and we had a 100-foot aluminum ladder that, like a rope ladder, that we rolled up and put in the back of the aircraft. And our job was to go find this LERP patrol, extract them, and insert these guys, and then be on our way. So when you're trying to find somebody hidden in the jungle, and you're on radios, it's a challenge. Because as much as we tried trying to be funny and codes and stuff like that, it was always difficult. So when you'd finally make contact with somebody, and of course they're being very discreet and quiet, and you'd say, okay, pop smoke. So they pop smoke. Well, there's red, yellow, purple, green, and anytime you pop smoke, there'd be about 6 or 8 smokes out there being popped. And so if you identified what you thought was them and it was the wrong color, or there was more than one of that color, you had to do it again. So it took us about 5 tries of popping smoke to identify exactly where they were. So the Viet Cong were out there trying to find these guys. So we finally find them. So now it's time to get in and out as quick as we can. So you're hovering right at treetop level, triple canopy jungle. So flight engineer, he pushes out the rope off the back ramp. It goes down, penetrates the jungle, and we start swapping guys out. Well, at some point during that process, one of the LERP guys, I don't know that he came in or out. Anyway, he comes crawling on his hands and knees up into the cockpit, and he's screaming, take it up, take it up. And I can hear AK rounds. And if you can hear a round in a Chinook, it has to just about be inside with you because it's loud. Anyway, so I'm hearing small arms, and this guy is panicked. And so the trouble is, we're in an operation here. And so I said to the flight engineer, I says, what's happening? How are we doing? He said, we're taking fire, and we got some guys on the rope. And then he said, okay, a couple dropped off. He said, okay, there's a guy on there, and I said, tell me when we can go. And finally he says, okay, there's still one on there. He said, oh, he just got shot and he's off. We're good. I said, okay. So we take off. I have no idea at that point where we were in the operation as far as who got in and who got out. But I take off fairly rapidly and climb up, and as soon as I get airborne, for want of a better word, We had guys on the aircraft that had been shot, and so I needed to find help. So I had two problems. One of them, I've got a 100-foot ladder hanging out the back that we can't retrieve, and you got a limited speed, otherwise it comes up and gets in the rotor system. So I'm restricted, but I'm still doing about 70 knots. And I'm at about 3,000 feet calling, and I've got about 3 Hueys, slicks out there responding that are close to me, and we pick an LZ that we're going to meet at, and then they'll meet me and take the wounded in. So about that time, the flight engineer calls me and says, we still got a guy hanging down on a rope. Well, that was the first time I got scared. Up until that point, it was all adrenaline. But at that point, I'm at 3,000 feet, and he's dangling down on that rope. Well, I slowed down, and as gingerly as I could, got ourselves into a little LZ. And there was a Huey already had landed, and these LZs are basically just one big circle with concertina wire around them and kind of a parking lot dug out on the outside for landing and taking off. So in order to land, I had to kind of start at one end and start laying the rope down. Well, at some point in time, this guy hopped off, and I went ahead and landed, and we got a number of things wrong with the aircraft. And so we shut down, and the flight engineer, they all start trying to figure out, and we start getting the wounded people onto the other aircraft. And we're kind of trying to assess everything. The crew, they're all up all over the aircraft trying to find out where all the bullets went. Pretty soon a guy came walking out with a Coca-Cola, and he comes up and he says, "You the pilot?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, I'm a guy that was hanging down on a rope." I said, "Wow." I said, "Man, I was scared you were going to fall off." He said, "You couldn't have shot me off." He said, "Now, I will say," he says, of course, he's got full pack and everything, you know. He said, when I was going into the wind, he said, it wasn't too bad. But he said, when that ladder spun around and I got my back into the wind, he said, that was a challenge. I said, I'll bet it was. Anyway, that's probably about the time I slowed down. I don't know. But anyway, pretty soon we got back to the company commander, and he was pretty shook up because he'd asked me to go on this mission. We were all okay, but we had a number of times. That was kind of one that by the time it was all said and done, and there's a few other things about that whole incident that were kind of like miraculous, but that's maybe for another story. But that's when I think of some of the time that's very memorable of certain things, that's one of the ones that comes to mind.